Hey everybody, I thought I'd do a information video on this old 5-speed Maillard freewheel I recently acquired with a set of wheels that were given to me. If you're doing like a bike restoration or just need some more information about this thing, just kind of want to take it apart and show you how that all works and reassemble it for you in case it's, well, hopefully it's informative for somebody out there who's doing a project or restoring an old bike or whatever. So this is a, like I said, Maillard, made in France. You can read all about Maurice Maillard on the internet if you want, how he started the company. These are pretty popular, I think, in the 60s and 70s. Not really sure, but that's the vintage of the wheel that it came on that I got. I don't really know the model number of this thing, or if it even has a model number. I know this is not the helicomatic, which was the problematic one that Maillard had. So this one happens to be a 1426, so it's got a 14, 17, 19, 22, and a 26 cog setup on it. It's English threaded. Fits just fine on my English hubs. There are French ones, French threaded, that you can be real careful with, not to interchange on hubs and stuff like that. But I think it says French engraved right here if it's a French threaded freewheel. This one, I don't think they had ISO back then, but this is definitely an English threaded freewheel. The threads are 11 millimeters deep. I did put this on my scale. It weighs 412 grams. From outside of the small cog to the outside of the larger cog, it's 24.6 millimeters wide, which is typical of the 5-speed spacing. And the cog spacing itself, cog to cog, is 5.5 millimeters as measured on my caliper. To get this thing off your bike wheel requires a somewhat of a rare, I guess, freewheel remover. You can get them out there, but this is a 24 spline freewheel remover interface. Bicycle Research, I believe, has a part number CT-3. If you can Google that, it's a freewheel remover. I've seen them out there for $22, and then I think I saw one on eBay the other day for 28 bucks from Greece, and then you got to pay shipping to get it out here. Anyway, that's kind of the overview of this freewheel, and I'll get into disassembling this thing. There's a couple of different options, and I'll go through those as we get going here. Some of the basic tools you are going to need, though. You're going to need a chain whip, definitely, to get the cogs off. These smaller two cogs spin onto the body of this, so you're going to need some way to unthread those. I may even need two of these depending on how you hold your freewheel, or how you want to hold your freewheel to keep it from moving. The way I do it is I have this old Suntour freewheel vise. That's kind of handy. Kind of handy to use. Holds my freewheel in place so I can work on it. Just clamp this in my big vise out in the garage and then go ahead and spin these off. But whatever method you use, whether you use one here to hold it and then another one here to spin it off, it's up to you. You're gonna need that. You're gonna need like a nail set or a pin spanner wrench. There's a ring in here that you're gonna need to remove, and it's got these two little indents in it for a pin type spanner wrench, or you can do what I did. I used this nail set and a hammer to loosen that. A small screwdriver would be helpful. Some kind of pointer device to help manipulate the pawls that are in here, and I'll show you that on the reassembly. And then if you have the freewheel remover that I talked about at the beginning of this, this isn't the right one, but this is really helpful to hold this freewheel in place when you're working on it as well. So that would fit, you know, to take it off your wheel, you would obviously use it this way, but you can also reverse it to hold your freewheel in like a vise, so you can work on this ring and assembly. So those are the basic tools that I think you're going to need to work on this. But again, if you want to improvise, that's perfectly fine. So getting into it, as mentioned, we're going to spin these two outer cogs off. They are threaded with a right-hand thread, so we need to spin them counterclockwise. And I've already done this, but take your chain whip and put on the larger of the two bottom cogs here. These two are machined together, and you can spin it off counterclockwise. Obviously, I've done this already. It's loose. And then we'll get these off here. Set that aside. They just thread right onto the freewheel body. The rest of these are just installed on a spline on the freewheel body itself with these three protrusions here. So cog, and then plastic spacer, cog, plastic spacer, and then the last cog. Basically, you're left with the freewheel body here. There's the inner ring I was talking about. This is a cone race for the outer set of bearings. There's an inner set of bearings as well under here. 90 bearings total inside of this thing, 45 on this side, 45 on this side. In order to get this ring off, you're going to have to hold the center stationary somehow, because it is threaded onto the main body here. So like I said, put your freewheel remover in a vise and then stick this on top of there and you're good to go. Or you can do like what I did. I used my nail set, and this is a left-handed threaded cone race. So to get it off, you're going to spin this clockwise. Okay. So I did this already earlier. And so you hit it with a hammer or whatever, or you can use like a punch or something like that and just spin this off. So once this ring comes off though, that's what's holding the rest of this freewheel together and all those bearings. So those 90 bearings are all loose in there. There's no cages. So you want to have your hand underneath this thing, or if you got your freewheel remover under there, then you're good to go. Spin this off clockwise and remove the race. There's 45 bearings right there, and now this whole thing is loose. So what I do is you can use a plastic bowl, or I like work everything on a towel. That keeps bearings from flying away and rolling away. So you just lift this off carefully. There's two spring-loaded pawls in here that cause the ratcheting sound that you hear. So those are gonna want to spring open once it clears. So be prepared for that. And then you can hear those click, and then that reveals the rest of the body. And then there's the rest of the 45 bearings on the inner race. You can dump those out in a bowl, get those all cleaned up, and you're good to go. Here's the pawl mechanisms. They just lift out. You got two of them from their slots. And then there's these metal tabs. Oh, there's a bearing right there I got to replace. There's these metal tabs that serve as springs here. Got two of those to remove. One on either side. And that's it. This is the inner race. Get this all cleaned up, and that's basically the disassembly of this unit. All right, for reassembly of this freewheel, it's pretty basically straightforward, kind of reverse of what the disassembly was. A few things here. Just get all the grease put back on. So this is the outer inner race for the bearings on the body. Go ahead and put some grease here on this race for this inner set of bearings. I already installed these bearings here, but what you're going to want to do on the ratchet ring, go ahead and put some grease for this corresponding inner race in this area where all the ball bearings are sitting, and then put your grease on the outer race here for all these ball bearings. And then you want to load each ball bearing individually onto these races. So 45 bearings here, 45 bearings on this side. Just make sure they're all kind of tucked in into the grease. There will be some gaps because it just takes 45. I'm not missing any bearings or anything like that. So you'll see a gap there. It's not missing a bearing or anything. It's just the way they built it. So once that's all loaded and ready to go, set that aside carefully. And then we can go ahead and start installing this. You want a little bit of grease on these pawls where the pivots are and stuff like that. You notice on the freewheel body, there's a through hole here on one of the slots. That's where the pawl goes. The other slot that doesn't have a through hole is where the spring goes. So a little bit of grease here. I should have pointed out, you also might want to put some grease here on the ratcheting mechanism. Just a very light grease there so that the pawls slide over it easily. You don't want to put a lot in there. If you put too much grease in the ratcheting mechanism, the pawls won't engage in there and the freewheel will slip. So again, go ahead and install the pawls after you put a little bit of grease on the pivot areas. Corresponding springs go in the adjacent holes. Make sure they seat all the way down in there into where it needs to go. This one's not cooperating. So it's all the way down, and then the spring goes down first, and then the pawl goes on top of it. Make sure it is spring action. You might want to have to bend these little metal tabs out a little bit, the metal spring, to give it some spring action there. And then again, a little bit of grease for this pawl in the pivot area, and then install its spring in the adjacent hole all the way down. There we go. So now each pawl is spring loaded. It's ready to go. So take your body there, grab the ratchet ring. So now here's this is the trickiest part of the whole assembly, is getting these pawls compressed and this ring on top of them. So what I like to do is start one side first with the ratchet ring at kind of an angle. Get it past the bearings, make sure you don't knock off any of the bearings, and then just kind of compress the pawl on the opposite side with the ring, pulling it over. At the same time, I'm using my index finger of my left hand to push the opposite pawl in so that it engages and goes all the way down. It won't go all the way down at first. You get your little pointer here and sneak under there and press the pawl into place until it goes down. If you're having still some trouble, you can also rotate the mechanism slowly so that the pawls drop into place. I'll pick it up from the inside. Pretend like you're freewheeling. There we go. You want to rotate it counterclockwise. Now the pawls are engaged and everything's in place. No bearings out of place, nothing fell out on the bottom, they're all in place still. So that's done. You also want to put some grease on this outer race, this cone race here for these bearings, or put some additional grease in there, your choice. Shim goes next, and then the cone race goes on top. Now remember, this was a left-hand thread, so to tighten it, we have to turn it counterclockwise on the freewheel body. Tighten it down as far as it'll go with your hand. And that's the kind of the preset condition. Make sure it's ratcheting correctly and all's well there. I should have mentioned while I had this open, that the freewheel pawls do not engage at the same time. Each one does not engage at the same time. What I found looking at this thing is one engages at a time separately from the other one, which I wouldn't think they would design a freewheel like that. You'd think they'd want them both to engage at the same time, but that means as you're pedaling, all the load goes into one pawl. You can kind of hear it. So it's click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. That means first one's going, then the second one's going right after it. But they're not both engaged at the same time. You know, what do I know? These things are pretty much bulletproof. But okay, so this is tight. Again, counterclockwise to tighten it. Now, you need to further tighten this thing so it doesn't come apart. A couple ways to do that. I didn't have a freewheel remover like this. This isn't the right one, but if you have the the correct freewheel remover, you can put it in your vise and then put this on top, and that holds everything together there. And that way you can work on this ring now. And if you have your spanner wrenches, you can tighten it that way, or you can take a hammer and this punch and set it pretty good. I don't think you can over tighten this too much. The shim should set all the clearances for the bearings, but if it does get too tight, then you can back off the ring just a little bit. But that's one way to do it. Like I said, what I did was I held it best I could with my fingers and the hammer, and just wrapped on it until it tightened up. So it worked pretty good. It's just the way it goes there for that. So anyway, that's it for this part of the assembly. Now, to get the rings back on the cogs, go ahead and just slide these on reverse of how you took them off. Again, these are symmetrical cogs. They don't seem to have an inner or outer face or direction. Cog, spacer, cog, spacer, cog. And then the last one threads back on clockwise this time. And that's it. It's all back together. Not really necessary to use your chain whip again to tighten this all back up. What I do is I just put them, reinstall them back on my wheels, and then when I'm pedaling, the chain gets on here and it just tightens up as I pedal. So the first few revolutions should tighten it back up. And that's it for the reassembly. Well, hopefully you found this video and information helpful. If you're restoring an old bike or just looking for some more information on these Maillard 5-speed freewheels. Kind of cool. If you have any comments or corrections to what I say, I do accept all comments and corrections. So I'm out there. I'm all about getting knowledge out there. So the more we share, the better off we are, I think, on all of our common interests. So thanks for watching.